Now we have Christian Meiley, co-founder and COO of TrueSkies Aviation Group. Christian grew up watching NASA launches and built Meiley Aviation in 2020 to bring transparency and care to private air travel. At TrueSkies, he handles operations, safety, and elite service for executives, entertainers, and private clients. Christian, welcome to the Gigs Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Nikki.
So excited. This is just so fun. I want to start with the moment for you that made you know, I got to get into aviation?
You know, there's a few points in my life that aviation kind of took a grasp on me. And I think one of the more notable ones was early on my uncle Kevin. He's not an actual uncle, but he's a really close friend of the family.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to go to Cape Canaveral, where NASA does their launches. So I had the pleasure of watching 5 launches when I was a child with my family. Life goes on and certain things transpire. I went to university. I thought my career path might have been something in marketing or something a little bit different. And it wasn't until, I kind of got into the entertainment business. I was buying charter for clients, and that's really kind of what intrigued me. And it wasn't until I started to fly private that I got the itch to actually start learning about the industry, researching the industry, and that's, I think, really where I got hooked. So early on is when I had my eye on it, but it wasn't until I actually got onto a Gulfstream that I said, I think this is for me.
Okay, real quick on the NASA launch. Were they all successful taking off?
It's a really good question, Nikki. And the reason I say that is I remember the 5th launch, and the 5th launch specifically.
Yeah.
Is our family actually stayed there for about 10 days waiting for the aircraft to take off. And because of weather, I actually didn't see that 5th launch. Yeah. And it's the same thing in private aviation. We unfortunately can't control the weather, and it's one of the few things that we need to be wary of.
Yeah. That is, would you look at that? Look how you tied that in.
Yeah. All
right. So you go into entertainment. What were you doing in the entertainment side?
Yeah. So in the entertainment side, in college, I was part of a group of young guys who started bringing in talent into Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston, Massachusetts.
Cool.
And through doing that type of work, post-college, we worked with a lot of people in the EDM world, which was kind of up and coming at the time, as well as some of the larger hip-hop artists, too. And that's actually where I started purchasing charter. That's where I had the opportunity to fly on charter. And that's where I had the opportunity to really start researching the ins and outs of the private aviation space. And there's so much information out there, and especially 10 years ago, where we didn't have ChatGPT and we didn't have all this information. So I really took a deep dive into the industry, and I realized that it needed some fixing and some clarity. And that's really how I got into it.
EDM is often on private because they're like playing a club until 6 a.m. and then they have to play somewhere else that next day, right? They're usually flying private. That's so interesting. How cool that that's kind of your first step into it. So you started researching it. Then when was the moment that you started Meiley Aviation? So
I started Meiley Aviation in 2020. And that was probably 5 years after I'd been in the industry. I'd worked for one of the largest European brokers. They had came into the United States and purchased my partner David Young's company, and I was in charge of running the New York office. So I did that for about 5 years, and as soon as the pandemic hit, I just needed a little bit of change. My thought process was, charter isn't always the exact solution for all of the flyers. And I wanted to be a solutions-driven company, and that's also what we've brought into TrueSkies as well. So I ran Meiley Aviation for 5 years with a small team, and our primary goal was finding solutions for client, whether that's charter, whether that's jet cards, or whether that's full aircraft ownership.
Can you please break that down? What's a jet card?
Well, I can explain that to you.
Yeah.
Jet cards think of it as a timeshare. You get a specific amount of time allotted to you that you pre-purchase. And to get a little bit more deeper into that is you have jet cards that are, asset owned. So companies that own the jets. And then you have jet cards where companies don't own the jets. And really the difference between those two types of programs, what we would call products programs, is the companies that own the assets, their job is operationalizing those airplanes to make them money. So it's not necessarily about, how much can they sell, but it's how can I position these planes with the least amount of repositioning as possible? Well, how can my utilization rate be as high on these planes? And then to the contrary, these companies that sell jet cards that don't own the assets, unfortunately, the client becomes a P&L, where sometimes they might be buying it at a certain price and making a ton of money on it because the aircraft's in great position. But it could be the opposite fold where the aircraft's not in good position. They've promised their client a certain price, so they're willing to lose it on certain trips. So that client becomes a P&L, and that's really where we saw the issue. And that's where TrueSkies Reserve really became our product.
Talk about that. Go into TrueSkies Reserve. Interesting.
TrueSkies Reserve, it's a practical solution. In charter, we buy at one price and we sell at another price.
Okay.
Your brokers don't always need to tell you exactly what they make on the flights, but we make between 10 and 20%.
Okay.
And with TrueSkies is we're able to let you know, hey, we're buying this aircraft at wholesale at this price. And if you're willing to give us a commitment up front, we're willing to tell you what that price is and give you a fixed service fee.
Even with potential delays, mechanical issues, and anything that would extend that time, how do you guys deal with that? Is that something that you guys take on?
Well, just like NASA, when weather gets into your way, those are some things you can't control.
Yeah.
So there are some things that are out of our control, but the things that are in our control, we do very well.
Wow.
Whether it's vetting the crew, it's vetting the operations, or whatever really goes into that mission and that specific mission, it's really all dependent. I mean, at the end of the day, aircrafts are machines and machines break. And that's why we have TrueSkies Trip Protection as well.
Let's get into it. Go ahead.
TrueSkies Trip Protection will basically guarantee your aircraft up to 100% of the cost that you purchase your aircraft for. So say you're flying from New York to California and you spend $50,000 on that aircraft breaks on you. That allows us to have $100,000 to find you a replacement aircraft of the same caliber or better.
So TrueSkies also has a presence in South America. And you have a lot of experience down there. You lived in Brazil, Argentina. What brought you down there? Tell me about that experience.
Brazil, and South America in general is one of the largest growing aviation markets in the world. Maybe not by volume, but by percentage. 10 years ago, it'd be very difficult to find a Gulfstream to charter down there. Now we have Gulfstreams, we have Bombardiers, and we have Embraer. Embraer is a manufacturer based in Brazil and one of the fastest growing manufacturers as well. My experience down there has been buying and selling aircraft, advising operators, even advising a lot of the charter broker community and the aircraft broker community in the United States and really bridging the gap between North and South America.
So how long were you living in South America before, I guess, now you're back up in New York most of the time?
So I still split my time between New York, Brazil.
Okay.
Very rarely get to spend time in New York where home is, but I'm 25 minutes from Teterboro, 25 minutes from White Plains, and people who fly in our industry know those are very common areas to fly.
Got it.
I snowbird down to Brazil.
Genius.
Yeah.
I'm visiting. That's so cool. Do you remember a big client, or, maybe if it was with Meiley or if it was with TrueSkies, with a client that you're like, damn, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. This is what I've learned over the years, that I'm in the right position to be doing this.
There's been a few of those moments, and, the one that pops into my head specifically, and, it's sometimes not all glitz and glamour in private aviation. There's been a lot of rescue missions that I've done throughout the years, specifically in the Caribbeans.
What do you mean?
Back in 2018, I forgot the hurricane's name, but it did some tremendous damage down in Puerto Rico. And we were able to not only send supplies and goods down there with some of the airplanes, because there weren't any airplanes there to bring people out. So you'd have to bring airplanes from other places into the country to get people, to get other animals. I remember was a big thing that we were doing as well. We had the idea of, when these catastrophes happen or when these event happens in some of these remote places that don't have the most resources, is we'll bring the resources in on the aircraft and then we'll bring the passengers out on that same aircraft as well.
Wow. I bet that was a moment of, hell yeah, I'm supposed to be doing this. That's so cool. And then getting into entertainment, were you always, when you're working in aviation, always in entertainment, or were you indifferent with private clients? I guess, where is the majority of your time?
You know, I'd say I split my time 50-50, maybe between the entertainment industry and some of the private clients, some Fortune 500 companies, some family offices, and some just general high net worth individuals.
Yeah.
You know, where I've come into the entertainment space is, you know, I had the experience with working with some of the hip hop groups, some of the EDM acts, and, you know, where I've really been able to, you know, connect the dots within the aviation world and the entertainment world is working with some of the larger acts that, you know, David has inherently worked with for a long period of time, and going into South America, going into Asia, going into Europe. You know, we don't just have the experience of going back and forth from the East Coast to the West Coast, from New York to Florida. You know, we really have a global presence, and that's really where I kind of find a good foothold between our partnership. It just creates a really good synergy. So, you know, same thing with how all industries are always evolving, is there's always new people, always new talent coming up. And, you know, my job is bringing up some of these younger artists and supporting some of those legacy acts that we've had for decades. What
would you say is the main thing that separates you guys from other brokerages and operators?
That's a good question. You know, it's always hard to say the people behind the business, but it really is the people behind the business. You know, myself and David are pretty well known within the aviation community. And we're just known as transparent and good guys.
Yeah.
You know, just this morning you saw us with, you know, a handful of other brokers who we do compete with in the space. But we have those relationships where we want to make the space better, not only for the entertainers, but for the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Because it's an unregulated industry. And, you know, the more transparent, the more honest that we can be within it, and not only to our clients, but to our peers.
Yeah.
You know, it comes to the theory of, you know, rising tides, you know, raises all ships.
How big is TrueSkies right now?
TrueSkies right now, we have roughly 6 people that sell for us.
Okay.
We have a back office in Columbus that's about 15 people.
Dang.
So we're roughly about a 20-person company at the moment.
Okay.
So there's been some fast growth.
My goodness. Yeah. Where do you hope to be in 5 years?
5 years from now is, you know, it's hard to project because, you know, we're not looking to be the biggest company. You know, a lot of times, you know, people focus on growth, people focus on size, where I think our goal and our vision is to focus on quality and focus on the right people. You know, it can be a little bit of an oversaturated industry. There's a lot of people that are fighting for the same clients. And, you know, what's important for us is we're working with the right clients that really want the right solutions and, you know, not necessarily the best price, but the best value.
Yeah.
And people often get price and value mixed up.
I'm sure if you're in this space, you know there's a certain cost to it. And there's a certain cost to, you know, what would you put under the umbrella of what they're really paying for?
Flying private is a time machine. I mean, having the luxury of pulling up to an aircraft, opening your door, getting your luggage loaded on, taxiing off is a win all of itself.
Yeah,
We've all
man.
flown commercial before. Flying to Nashville, I had to wait in security for an hour while they checked my bag. You think about, you know, that aspect of it, where you're saving 2 hours pre-flight and 2 hours post-flight. And then you also think about, you know, the actual direct flights that these commercial carriers offer. You know, it doesn't mean that, you know, just because you're in Nashville and you have a show somewhere in Idaho, that you can get there nonstop. You might have to take 2 or 3 different commercial flights to get there.
Usually not. Yeah.
There's a certain price point on everybody's time. And it's a really hard formula to calculate, and sometimes it's quantitative, sometimes it's qualitative, but it's a time machine. I mean, I had a client that was flying from, you know, North Carolina to Foxwoods where she had a show, and they could have done it commercially and it would have been a 13-hour day for them, or they could have done it privately and we ended up making it a 3-hour travel day for them.
Well, that's actually, I'm talking a lot to artist managers about that, where they're saying, okay, travel days are not off days. And so it's really tough for these artists and for the crews to be like, all right, well, when different, booking agents, when they're planning the routing, they're like, okay, well, it's a travel day. This is their day off. Then they can have a show. It's like, dude, that's not a day off when it's a 13-hour day. Yeah. So that's also like a way that I feel like they can take care of their crew and their artists. Oh, that's so cool. And it just feels special. There's a fruit platter for us. I feel very special.
It's a good
with
fruit
a fruit
platter.
platter, man. Some fresh strawberries on a plane.
Oh,
Bruh.
wait till you get to my pet peeves then.
Tell me right now. Pet peeves. Let's go.
Pet peeves is catering.
Okay.
Catering can be extremely expensive on private jets. It can be extremely wasteful. We understand we don't want people to go hungry, but a lot of times people can overindulge and they think, oh, it's lobster tails, it's, 5-star dining experience. And while some flights do call for that, transatlantic, trans-Pacific flights, when you're flying 10, 14, 17 hours at a time, that stuff can be important. But, for a typical turkey sandwich, what we would consider a box lunch in the industry, you're talking $60 for the cost of that sandwich plus a $50 delivery fee. So if you spread that across 10 people, you're spending $500 for turkey sandwiches, and they're not even going to include the delivery fee for you. So
what was the craziest catering expense that you've witnessed?
I've seen a $9,000 catering bill before. We've had clients that don't know whether they want sushi, don't know whether they want pizza, don't know whether they want organic, don't know whether they want this or that.
So get it all.
And, that's where, we're not going to tell the clients no. What the clients want, the clients can get.
Yep.
And, what we make sure in those types of instances is when the aircraft get onto the ground, we're able to feed the line guys, the guys that were helping us go back and forth to the aircraft yesterday and today and are loading our luggage. So, we also try to give back in those types of circumstances as well. And you have to be careful clearly with, some perishable items and food and liability. But I've seen $9,000, $10,000 catering bills before.
You're telling me that I should be getting into catering. That's what you're telling me.
I know a few people have started catering companies that started off as charter brokers. So,
dude,
yeah.
My gosh, that's the unspoken cost, the crazy cost.
Yeah.
What's another pet peeve?
Another pet peeve on the operations side of aircraft, right? There's something what we call owner approval in the space, right? So there's two ways that, aircraft ownership in our space typically happens. They're either owned by the company or by the airline, or they're owned by a specific individual. In that instance, the owner utilizes their aircraft when they want. And when they're not utilizing it, that's when it goes out to the charter market. And one of the most difficult things for us as charter brokers, or for charter brokers in general, is we don't always know who those end users are or how friendly those charter owners are. For a good example of that is, there's certain aircrafts that are notoriously on the charter market that we know or we're never going to get owner approval for. They might price really, really well. They might be in great position to present to a client. But unless you really know and understand the market, hey, listen, maybe I shouldn't present that aircraft to Nikki because I know she's really going to like it. She's going to want to book it. And then I'm going to have to tell her she can't have it.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing we want to do. So there's a big dynamic in understanding the owner approval process, the operators that you're working with. And we're lucky enough to have traded and buy and sell aircraft enough that, we typically know these owners, or we know who these owners' brokers are, that can give us honest feedback of, hey, is this aircraft actually owner friendly, or, is it just on the charter market, for one reason or the other?
So I can imagine someone's paying for this VIP experience. So there's a lot of pressure on it, and you guys are responsible for delivering. So how do you go about prepping for this, and what does that look like?
It's a good question because there's so many different variables within aviation, and it starts off with the client. What does the client want? But, you also have to look at the other factors. Is where are we going in the world? There's times that we've gone into, war-torn countries that occasionally have no fly zones, and we have to wait till that airspace gets opened up because there's missiles or there's war going on.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of that goes on. So you really have to understand the dynamic of who the client is, what the mission is, what the purpose of the mission is, because that's just as important as, the equipment that they're flying on. Do they need to make a meeting at a certain time? What is the reason that they're traveling? What is the backup solutions that you guys have in place in order to support, whether it's a mechanical issue where, you're in the Middle East and there's no other aircrafts necessarily around. Or another really good example of it is, if you have a flight at 10 o'clock at night and that aircraft's not, is broken, something that typically happens in our industry is crews typically duty on in the morning and they duty off at night. So if you're trying to scramble for a plane at 10 p.m., chances are you're going to have to pull a fresh crew. And there's very limited amount of people. So I think to answer your question more to the point is, you have to understand your customer. You have to understand the mission. You have to understand the purpose of the mission. And I think from there, you're really able to kind of create a game plan and really execute on the client, because not everything is in our control.
Okay, what are some red flags to look for in other charter operators? Communication
is first and foremost. Whether you're a broker communicating with the client, we have a requirement for our team to respond to our clients in 15 minutes or less.
Wow.
When clients have a question, we need to be able to deliver them the answer. And it's the same thing on the operator side, the people who we work with. If we're not getting answers quick, there's usually something that's going on. And the other thing I think is important to note, especially for end buyers is, your broker should always be disclosing the tail number to you. And if it is a floating fleet, they should be disclosing who the operator of the aircraft is to you. Before ever signing any type of paperwork, you, as the person who's signing that paperwork, have full authority to get that information prior to signing that contract.
All the things that I know for when I'm flying private all the time. And on a plane, are you a sleeper, reader, worker, or movies?
I'm a sleeper.
Sleeper.
I don't like flying.
What? Hot take.
Hot take.
Hot take, you don't like flying.
I do not like flying, no.
Why?
I'm a nervous flyer.
What?
Yeah. As I've gotten older and I fly more, there's still a little bit there's more comfort in it.
Uh-huh.
And I'd much rather be on an aircraft this size than, say, a smaller aircraft. And yeah, when you're in smaller aircrafts, you really feel a lot, and some people really enjoy that experience and some people don't. And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily unsafe. I just tend to be a little bit motion sick and it tends to be sometimes a little bit dramatic. So
that's crazy. Thank you so much, Christian, for being on the podcast. This was so fun.
And thank you for having me, Nikki.